I just gave you at least a 3-credit college course worth of stuff to focus on. Maybe in 2015, after 22 years in the corporate world, I walked away and started Sleepy Lizard Avocado Farm. At the time, people thought I was crazy. I know this because they'd come up to me and say, "Tom, are you crazy?" But their question didn't bother me because I knew I wasn't crazy, because I had a plan. And I believed in my plan because I put so much time, effort, and focus into it. Fast forward 7 years and it turns out everything's okay. We're doing great. We ain't starving. We're loving our lives. And it just so happens that now 7 years later, everybody wants to leave the corporate world and start some type of alternative small business. And if the statistics I'm reading about in the news are true, it's highly likely that you are one of those people who want to make a change. It's highly likely that you are part of the so-called Great Resignation. I've noticed over these past 7 years that the line of questioning I get from people has changed from "Are you crazy?" to "Tom, how were you able to leave the corporate world and start your own small business?" The answer is in these 4 books I'm holding right here. These 4 books taught me how to master our 4 most limited resources: money, time, other people, and focus. And I would like to share with you how these 4 books taught me how to manage those resources and how I was able to successfully leave the corporate world and start Sleepy Lizard Avocado Farm. I'm not saying my way was the best way. I'm not saying it's the right way. I am certainly not saying it's the only way. I am simply telling you how I did it. Back when I was in college, my senior advisor pulled me aside. I was struggling trying to figure something out with the computer. This guy had a PhD in computer science, and he told me, he said, "Don't worry about it." He said, "You're not supposed to know everything." He said, "This is a new industry. Nobody knows everything yet. We're inventing things as we go along." He said, "We need to learn." He said, "But one thing you need to get comfortable with is that the only thing separating you and being an expert in something is reading a good book on that topic." And I took that to heart. And when I got out of college and I started making money, I wasn't quite sure what to do with it, right? And everybody's dragging your arm one way or another. There's stockbrokers and investment companies and all this kind of stuff. "We'll manage your money, we'll manage your money." Your grandma's telling you to put it in a coffee can and bury it in the backyard. But I noticed, like, none of those people seem to be well off themselves. So I said to myself, if I want to manage my money, I better go back to what Fernando Nevada taught me how to do, my senior advisor, and read a book on how to manage money. And I thought, where better to start than Personal Finance for Dummies? Because I was a dummy. I didn't know a thing about finance. And I read this book, and I did the exercises it told me to do. And the book taught me, it said, number 1, make sure you're properly insured, right? You never want to go backwards. You never want to have a disaster take you backwards financially. Maybe you'll tread water and stay the same, but you never want to get knocked backwards. And the way you do that is having proper insurance. Number 2, he said, get rid of all your consumer debt, your credit cards, your high-interest car loans, all your gizmos and gadgets. Don't take vacations on credit card, all that kind of stuff. Get rid of all that high-interest debt. And that money you would have been paying to interest, stick that instead in savings, which was principle number 3. Pay yourself first. Build up some kind of a savings. This book teaches you how to minimize your tax exposure. And I followed all the little suggestions in this book. $10 a month here, $55 a month there. Little by little, I was able to build up a stake to where when the time came to jump out of the corporate world, start my own business, I had enough money to pay the bills, to feed my family, and also to invest in starting up the business. But knowing how to manage money isn't enough, and that brings us to time. In praise of slowness, we need to learn how to manage our time if we're going to run a business. When you have a job, in a lot of ways your time is managed for you, right? You show up at this time, you take lunch at this time, meetings are scheduled at these times, you go home at this time, you take vacation from this day to this day. People tell you how to manage your time by and large. But when you own your own business, it's on you. You have to manage your time. And in order to manage time, you need to understand the concept of time. And when you read this book, you'll learn that keeping track of time wasn't real important until we started paying people by the hour. You see, before paying by the hour, we did piecework. You got paid by how many pairs of shoes you made, by how many apples you picked. If you picked enough apples to make enough money that day, you stopped picking apples, you quit, you got your money, and you went home. And then somewhere along the line, I think it was over in Germany, but it says so in this book, they came up with the idea of let's bring people into this place at a certain time, and we'll dismiss them at a certain time. And we will pay them for the amount of time they spend with us, no matter how much they contribute or produce. And in order to do that, they had to start keeping time at a more granular level, right? Farmers just needed to know when it was spring, summer, fall, and winter. You needed to know when it was morning, afternoon, and night. But now if you have a job that starts at 8 a.m., you need to know that it's 7 and you need to start walking to work. And you need to know that it's 7:45 and you better hurry up because you're about to be late. And you better need to know that it's 8 o'clock so you can start working that day. And you wait and you wait and you wait until you hear that bell go off and it's noon. And that means you got 30 minutes to go have lunch. Then that bell rings again, it's 12:30, you got to go back. And then you wait another 4.5 hours till 5 p.m. Boom, that bell goes off again and you go home. And that's where the concept of keeping time came from. And then once they started putting those clocks up in town square and ringing bells to tell people where they had to be, everything changed. Everything sped up. Now people are hurrying. Now people are anxious. Now people feel like there's not enough time. And is that not exactly what everyone is trying to get away from right now? Is that not exactly what the Great Resignation is about? People want to get out of the corporate world because they spent 2 years at home because of the pandemic, and now they're going back to offices saying, oh my God, I'm sitting here. I'm not producing anything. So those of us that are kind of like following our hearts and getting out of the corporate world and going back to running our own things are kind of going back to that time where before time mattered. It didn't matter what hour of the day it was. And this was a very eye-opening book for me, because until I read this book, I was one of those people that thought you had to rush, thought you had to cut corners on sleep, thought you always had to be on the go, get going, get moving. And this book taught me how to be very efficient and effective using my time. So now that you know how to manage money, you know how to manage time, you're ready to start managing people. The 1-minute manager meets the monkey. This book puts you through a self-analysis, where you have to say to yourself, man, let me look at the things I'm doing. Am I doing the things I should be, or am I neglecting them? Am I doing a lot of things that I should not be doing? Maybe other people should be doing those things instead of me. Are people sloughing their work off onto me? And he uses a really good technique called a monkey on your back. He defines a monkey on your back as a task that you should not be doing, that someone else should be doing. But it's not just what happens in business or in work, it's what happens all around us. And this book teaches us that there's 3 types of time: institutional-driven time, self-driven time, and others-driven time. Institutional-driven time is the kind of stuff you can't get away from. Every now and then you got to sit down once a year and do your taxes. Every now and then you got to sit down once a year, maybe once every other year, and do the registration for your vehicles. Maybe every 5-6 years you got to go to the DMV and get your driver's license picture taken again. That is institutional time. That is time that is imposed upon you by the institution. Someone else can't do it, and you have to do it. The second type of time is others-driven time. And that's where we get into trouble. Those are the monkeys people put on our back. Those are the things that people ask us to do for them. And the book teaches us you don't have to eliminate others-driven time, but you have to manage it. If your boss gives you a task, if you want to keep your job, you got to do that task. But when your daughter tells you you have to help her clean her room because she has a friend coming over and she doesn't want the room to look dirty, you might be able to say, you know what, I've got more important ways to spend my time. It's your room, it's your mess, you clean it. But that's very hard to do. We've been taught that it's bad to say no, especially in a work setting. And it's a hard habit to break, but if you can master that, if you can put into place the principles laid out in this book, you will minimize your others-driven time. Like one thing for me with Microsoft Outlook, it would show like available 1 to 3, and I'd get an appointment, I'd get an invitation to a meeting, 1 to 3, and I would reject it. And then they'd give me another one like 2 days later, like 2 to 4, because I'd reject it. And they'd call me or email me. They'd say, hey, you keep rejecting this meeting. It says you're open from 1 to 3. And I say, yeah, I am open from 1 to 3. I'm not rejecting the meeting because I don't have the time to go. I'm rejecting the meeting because I ain't going to your meeting. You don't need me there. Would blow their minds. What? I'm inviting you to a meeting. No one says no to a meeting unless they can't make it because of time constraints. Well, I'm sorry. I choose how I'm going to spend my time. You don't choose how I'm going to spend my time. That's a waste of my time. I ain't doing it. And once you learn how to manage others-driven time, you maximize your self-driven time. And the more self-driven time you have, the more effective you will be. If you're trying to lose 20 pounds and your choices are go to the gym or help your daughter clean her room, what's going to get you closer to that goal of losing 20 pounds, right? The 1-Minute Manager meets the monkey. The fourth limited resource that I want to talk about today is focus. Nobody talks about focus. Everyone talks about how to manage your money. Everyone talks about how to manage your time. As I said earlier, you can get a whole degree in college on how to manage other people. But nobody talks about focus. Well, this book here, What Color is Your Parachute, helped me to, number one, determine what my priorities and my goals were for my life, and then gave me techniques of how to stay focused on them. And this book is great. He's probably got a website or something by now. I mean, I read all these books back before the advent of the internet. But this book talks about learning about yourself and who are you and what makes you tick. And maybe the way you make money should coincide with what makes you tick. Like if you have a bad back, you probably shouldn't be a laborer on a construction firm, right? And this book gives a series of exercises so a person can get to know himself. And I still have my exercises here. I did this 20 years ago. Now, I'm not going to open them up and share them on the internet because these are things that are very personal to me. But I remember one of the exercises from this book. You took out 10 blank sheets of white paper, and on the top you wrote the words, I am. On 10 sheets of paper, I am, to the 10 sheet of paper. And then you went back and you picked the first thing and you wrote down what it is that you are. You might write a husband, or you might write a father, or you might write a soccer player, or whatever. And you fill out the top 10 things that you would say you are. I'm a brother, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm an employer, I'm a pizza maker, whatever comes to mind. You write those 10 things down. Then you go back to the first sheet where it says, I am a whatever. I am a son. You write down all the attributes about yourself that define you as a son. Then you go to the next thing. I am a pizza maker. You write down, I am, boom, 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 boom. You go through all 10. And then you go back and you look, you lay all the 10 of them out and you circle the common things. And you look at the things that aren't real common. And across those 10, I found some things that were common about me. Some things that whatever role I played were core to my being. I actually have that exercise here in that envelope. But there's a bunch of other exercises, and I did them. And they direct you in the book, and then that helps guide you toward the type of thing you should be doing. One of the big things, one of those aha moments, or the epiphany, as people say, that I got out of doing the exercises from the book, I don't know where this came from, but on the top of the one page I wrote, I am a person who likes to wear a t-shirt and jeans. I don't know where that came from, but that's where I'm most comfortable. I'm just very comfortable in a t-shirt and jeans. Now, for my career for 22 years, I always had to be in a nice suit with a tie and all that kind of stuff, clean shaven, etc. And that just popped into my head. I am a person who likes to wear jeans. And then what are all the things about that? You know, and I like to be outdoors. I like it when my hands are dirty. I like it when someone says, oh, did you cut your hand? And I look and I didn't even notice. But whatever I'd been doing earlier that day was so fun or interesting that it caused me to get a cut and I didn't even notice. And I learned about myself that I like to be outdoors. I like to be able to get dirty. I like to wear clothing that can kind of take a beating because of the stuff I like to do. Well, that means that whatever my end game is, whatever my business is, it's probably something outdoors. It's probably something physical. It's probably something that you don't need to get dressed up and be presentable. And that's just one of like hundreds of little light bulbs that went on for me, that you record and you keep track of them. And then you could say to yourself, well, I definitely ain't going to start an accounting firm, but you know, maybe I could do a farm, or maybe I could do some type of construction work or some type of outdoor work, you know, and you kind of zero in on how it is you want to spend your time. And by doing so, you're then able to eliminate all the stuff that you know isn't right for you. So I recommend this book, What Color is Your Parachute?, to learn how to manage your focus. Now I'm going to introduce a fifth book, and it's called The Millionaire Next Door. This book, The Millionaire Next Door, reminds me of the discovery of penicillin. It was like an accidental side effect of a scientific experiment. This guy, Thomas Stanley, I think he was a sociologist or something. He wanted to study what made millionaires tick. And what better way to do that than by studying millionaires? So he started going around the country having these little forums, these little symposiums, where he would invite people who had a net worth of $1 million or more to come and volunteer to be part of the study. And when he first started inviting people to his forums and seminars, he would hold them in expensive hotels. And he would have expensive catering with wine and champagne and all kinds of stuff like that. And he noticed nobody was eating the fancy food, and nobody was cracking open the bottles of wine. And after the third or fourth of these little forums he had, he pulled a guy aside. He says, "Hey, is there anything I could do a little differently?" And the guy says to him, I would have ate a hamburger if you put out hamburgers. He goes, "I don't eat all that fancy stuff." And for whatever reason, that caught his attention, Thomas Stanley's attention, and he started looking around. He noticed, like, the people weren't showing up in expensive suits and gowns, and they weren't wearing a lot of jewelry. They weren't wearing flashy watches. And he started paying attention to what they were driving out in the parking lots. And believe it or not, most of them were driving Ford F-150 pickup trucks. They weren't showing up in Mercedes-Benz and Jaguars and BMWs. And as a scientist, again, I don't know if it was a sociologist or what, but that kind of got his attention. And he put together a whole bunch of surveys and questions different from what he initially wanted to do. And he put together a profile of the average millionaire. And it turns out millionaires aren't the people you think they are. He learned that the majority of millionaires got rich slowly. He learned that the majority of millionaires did not inherit their wealth. He learned that the majority of millionaires buy used cars. They also tend to buy the same make and model car every 4 to 5 years. It turns out millionaires are simply people who are very good at managing focus, time, other people, and of course, millionaires are good at managing money. Managing focus, for example. The reason millionaires tend to buy the same make and model car every time they buy a car is because they already made the decision once. And they know they like that car, be it the Toyota Camry or the Honda Accord or the Ford F-150. They know they like it. So 5 years later, they're not going to spend a few hours researching new cars and going looking at cars. They just say, I like the Ford F-150. I want one that's 5 years newer than mine. Bing, bang, boom. Now they got a new car and away they go. And all that time other people spend researching cars and bargain hunting and going from place to place to place, the millionaire spends planning how he's going to use his time. The millionaire sits down and plans how he's going to allocate his finances. The millionaire focuses on what he's going to have his employees doing for him the next week. He doesn't defocus. The reason I bring up this fifth book, The Millionaire Next Door, is because it contains empirical data that lends credence to the importance of the 4 other topics we talked about in the 4 other books. It shows how people who own their own businesses put these 4 principles to work to become successful. A few suggestions on how to put these books to work in your life. First, I suggest you read them. Second, if there's exercises in the book, get out a pen and paper and do the exercises. Third, treat this like a job. Treat this like you do when you're losing weight, when you're going to the gym. Dedicate however many hours a week you think you can to it, from a specific start time to a specific stop time on a certain day. Thursdays from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., whatever. Read your books, do the exercises, do your focusing. And then I want you to observe yourself as you're going through life. Are you following the financial principles laid out in Personal Finance for Dummies? Are you treating time the way you learned to treat it from In Praise of Slowness? Are you letting other people tell you what you're going to do, or are you deciding how you spend your time and resources? And what are you focused on? And then you'll have to strike up a balance, right? Are you going to go 100% towards starting the business? Are you going to put every spare penny towards starting that business? Are you going to cut out all hobbies and social life so you could dedicate all your time to that on one end of the spectrum? Or are you going to slack and procrastinate and never quite get around to it, and every time you have 2 nickels to rub together, you're going to spend 15 cents on something? Find yourself a balance in the middle. I don't know if your sister wants you to be the maid of honor in her wedding and you get along really good with her, and you know it's going to cost you a few $1,000s and a couple of 100 hours of time and focus, but maybe you want to dedicate that time to your sister. Then know that by saying yes to being the maid of honor, you're going to be that many thousands of dollars and that many hours of time and that many hours of focus away from your goal to start your own business. And you have to decide what to do. You weren't planning to go to Paris for Christmas, but now all your friends are going to make this trip to Paris because they got a good deal on a hotel. You jump in and go. You're one trip to Paris further away from obtaining your goal than you were. Start watching yourself. Start analyzing that kind of stuff. Start making little notes. Am I on track to start this business? Am I not? I just gave you at least a 3-credit college course worth of stuff to focus on. Maybe 6 credits. I don't know. But again, I really want to emphasize the importance of doing the exercises in this book, What Color is Your Parachute? And if you're like me and somehow by doing these exercises, you discover that you too are a person who likes to dress in jeans and a t-shirt, and you happen to like this t-shirt, this beautiful Sleepy Lizard t-shirt, and you want one, go to guacfarm.com. GUACFARM.com. That's where we sell these shirts. And when our avocados are in season, we sell 10-pound boxes of avocados shipped everywhere around the United States. Now I got to run out the grove and crank up my pump. While I do that, you go to guacfarm.com, and I will see you on the next video.